Bueno, buenas noches a todos y a todas en esta continuación de esta serie de conversatorios alrededor del trabajo de Jung y la vigencia, la presencia del trabajo de Jung. Y para mí hoy es un grandísimo placer presentarles a un gran amigo de la casa, Michael Conforti. Michael es analista junguiano, es el director de la Psique Institute, que por más de 35 años ha estado investigando la relación entre materia y psique. Hoy en día tiene un programa que ha abarcado más de 22 países y algo que hemos comentado en otros momentos, Michael y yo, es que para mí lo que Michael está haciendo es un gran aporte a la psicología post-junguiana. Creo que los conceptos que está trayendo, la forma en que los está desarrollando, son un gran aporte para la parte clínica. Y para mí también, como siempre, es un placer presentarles a Felipe Arango, que hoy va a ser aparte, nos va a estar apoyando en la traducción. Well, Michael, very, very welcome, and it's a pleasure to have you over here.
Thank
Gracias,
you.
Felipe.
Beautiful introduction. Thank you. Thank you.
Gracias por esa introducción. Una hermosa introducción.
Eh, um, Bueno, para mí algo que es muy interesante en relación a los campos arquetipales es que Michael sigue un elemento que yo creo que es muy importante en la obra de Jung, que es que los conceptos se ven. Los conceptos junguianos, eh, los conceptos junguianos se pueden ver y se pueden rastrear.
Okay. Eduardo is saying that you have done an outstanding work regarding with the fact that you've been able to make visible the Jungian concepts, not as something that are like far beyond or something, but something that is rather applied and like jointed with matter.
Well,
Y el concepto de los campos arquetipales, Michael ha logrado aterrizarlo de manera que también son visibles.
And did you have the ability to make tangible the concept of archetypal fields?
Entonces, desde este aspecto, yo sí quisiera comenzar un poco por recordar que los arquetipos funcionan como un patrón predeterminado que tiene un núcleo desde el cual empieza a girar lo que ese arquetipo le pertenece.
I would like to remind that the archetypes have this core and are patterns that have a core that something goes around it.
Y lo que Michael trajo fue que ese elemento de lo arquetipal lo llevó al concepto de campo. Y como campo tiene unas características que permiten visualizarlo. Tiene elementos que atraen, tiene elementos que repelen, tiene elementos que en su dinámica permiten ver el movimiento que tiene internamente.
That you had the ability to see the mechanics behind that core and that movement, that feel, how it configures itself, and you were able to portray that.
Y yo sí quisiera que Michael nos hablara de cómo fue en su experiencia, cómo fue que se llegó, cómo desde la relación que tuvo con sus mentores, cómo logró llegar a ese concepto de campo arquetipal.
And how we would like to ask you, how were you able to develop that concept? I mean, by interaction with your teachers, your mentors, with the theory, how did you landed on that idea? How did you develop it?
well, I'll tell you the story. And it's also a synchronicity, the way you began tonight, Eduardo. I was reading one of my favorite authors. His name is, I'll go slowly, Felipe.
Huh?
One of the authors, I'm going to tell you a little about a synchronicity in the introduction.
Okay, yeah.
I was reading beforehand about Goethe, and Goethe was interested in what they called what was destined to become manifest. What was destined to become manifest, which is exactly how you're beginning your orientation today, Eduardo. Great line.
We are always in touch. So.
Michael habla de una sincronicidad particular. Él estaba leyendo a Gunther, el apellido del autor, Gunther, quien hablaba de una frase muy particular de lo que está destinado a volverse manifiesto.
Well, the story. And I grew up in a very traditional Italian home. And there were two different dialects. There was Sicilian and Neapolitan. And I was always touched by the language and the sounds. And I always had a sense that the sounds were emerging from some other place. And the sounds were conveying something about the soul of the culture. As a kid, you don't think this way, but you knew. I was fascinated by the different sounds. The same words said differently with different sounds to it.
Bueno, Michael habla de una fascinación que desarrolló al crecer en un hogar tradicional. Y habla le sorprendía mucho cómo en relación a los lenguajes, diferentes sonidos podían generar, mismas palabras con diferentes sonidos podían generar como distintas mecánicas, distintas cosas, distintos efectos.
So I held that, and I found as I went through college, I developed this interest in words. And certain words affected me so deep. I didn't know what they meant, but they affected me. And I remember in my second year of college in New York, they mentioned the word anima and alchemy. And I said, I don't know what the heck they mean, but there's something about that that's going to shape my life.
Wow.
Wild.
Desde la... muy bonito, muy intuitivo. Hay algo muy especial que trae Michael acá, es que desde la universidad él estaba cautivado por las palabras, algo que aparentemente trae un sonido, pero genera una movilización en el interior. Y él en la universidad oyó dos palabras que le movieron algo por dentro y que de alguna manera empezaron a configurar algo en él, ¿no? Activaron algo en él. Y estas palabras eran ánima y alquimia.
And the teacher really said, look, this is a course in personality theory. We're going to just touch on Freud and Jung or whatever. And the words are not all that meaningful, but they were just to the concept of Jung. And I said, they're deeply meaningful. Again, I don't know what it means, but I'm going to, like you follow the thread of something. And I realized in many ways, alchemy is what you said earlier, Eduardo. It's the confluence of matter and spirit. And, for my life, the anima from a generative and a problematic way has been central in my life throughout. And especially as I age, I'll be 70 in another year and a half. It's more powerful than ever. And I'm not saying generative. I'm saying how this anima is constellated in terms of passions and what I need to do with my life. And it's like you hear the voice calling you.
Yes.
Okay. Bueno, él estando en la universidad en este curso de personalidad y estas dos palabras resonándole mucho, el profesor básicamente le dice que que en este curso de personalidad iban a tocar someramente a Freud, a Jung y a otro que eran conceptos junguianos, y él empieza a tener una primera una activación que le empieza a desarrollar, y que precisamente alquimia es este tema que hace una referencia a la confluencia y la relación de la materia y el espíritu. Y para Michael ha sido muy importante porque el ánima ha sido un concepto y una figura central que lo ha energizado, que ha generado toda una serie de pasiones consteladas que lo ha venido llevando a un lugar.
And then the big step really came when I entered the Jung Institute. I went to Zurich when I was 19, thinking I was going to begin training. And I went there and I was excited. And they said, well, just go home. You're too young. But again, it was la forza del destino più forte. The force of destiny was already working. And I didn't really know why I was there. I said, I want to be an analyst, a Jungian, but I had no idea that there was something already shaping this thing, shaping this life, that I had no idea what it was. I was a kid from Brooklyn. My father went to the 7th grade. My mother finished high school. I was the only one in my family ever went past high school. So I didn't know what this young stuff was, but something about it began to tug and pull. And I followed. And it was nuts. In 19, I went over to Europe thinking, I'm going to begin the analytics training. And, it didn't bother me. They said, you're too young. But I sensed, again, you don't know these things when you're that young, but I sensed something was starting. There was something that was being preformazione.
Preformados.
It was incredible. And you realize 40, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, almost 50 years later, this thing like a seed has been growing and taking shape. And, usually about 5 years after a certain growth, then you say, oh my God, that growth was about this piece. And then you find yourself on another trajectory or similar. And you find something has been unfolding from already 50 years around something that started. How many years ago?
Perfecto. Michael llegó con 19 años a Zúrich como a formarse, a acercarse a la psicología profunda. Un tema bastante complejo y él apenas llegó al instituto allá en Zúrich. Lo primero que le dijeron fue, bueno, tú eres muy joven, ¿tú qué haces acá? Sin embargo, él empezó a sentir que había una fuerza, algo que lo jalaba, algo que estaba preformado, constelando un destino. Y es bien interesante porque Michael dice que en su familia no es de pocos académicos, que él fue la primera persona en pasar el bachillerato, pero él sentía que había unas fuerzas jalándolo hacia cierto lugar y como dice él, es como una especie de cuerda que él siguió, como un campo preformado que se fue generando alrededor de su vida. Y que bueno, después de 50 años de estar como siguiendo este trayecto, ha visto cómo este proyecto y este camino se ha desplegado, se ha abierto y lo ha generado y le ha abierto un lugar en el mundo.
Then I came back and finished my graduate training, finished my bachelor's degree, finished my master's degree, and I applied to the Young Institute in New York. And I got in and it was a wonderful acceptance. And you know the expression, when you're ready, you meet the teacher that you're supposed to meet. Mm-hmm. Now I'll tell you the next part of the story. And this is what started to happen.
Bueno, entonces posteriormente a esto, después de que le dijeran eres muy pequeño y él no se lo tomara personal, pero él sabía su destino, él terminó su pregrado, su máster y entró a un instituto en Nueva York, donde, bueno, siguió su trayectoria, pero hay algo muy interesante y es que dice que ahí encontró a uno de esos profesores, esos mentores que uno sabe que se tenía que encontrar en el camino.
In a lot of ways, growing up the way I did in Brooklyn and with uneducated people that were hard workers, I mean, physical workers, and it was a very tough life. It was a lot of violence around me, a lot of criminality around me. And I learned from a young age, I didn't tolerate, we never talked about this part, Eduardo. I was never interested in the lighthearted approach to either life or psychology. Oh, everything's wonderful, let's just look at the bright side. And I often said, hopefully you can translate this, Philippe, I said, in America, they talk about apple pie, the great apple pie, And I said, that slice of the apple pie never made it to my table, where everything is wonderful and everything is great. And like you, Eduardo, you come from a country where there's been a lot of strife. And I come from an environment where it's not like you, it's very different, not exile, but it was very difficult. And it shaped the way I looked at people and what I accepted. And so, when I started looking at who I wanted to work with, whatever. It was a very difficult process. The first person I worked with in New York, I'll tell you the story in a minute.
Bueno, Michael salió de Brooklyn, de un entorno de gente muy trabajadora, labor física. Él dice que creció rodeado por violencia, por unas situaciones un poco complicadas. Y que precisamente por ese antecedente, él no compartía mucho como esta postura tan extremadamente positiva de la psicología y que todo es bueno y que él habla metafóricamente que del pastel de la psicología, esa pieza del pastel no iba con él porque él ya había entendido un poco lo que era la adversidad y bueno, un poco entender la dificultad e incluso un esbozo como de lo que es el aspecto sombrío de la vida, ¿no?
And the first analyst I worked with in New York, it's a very strange story. Again, it shaped me in a lot of ways. When I went to the first meeting at the institute, all the new trainees were there to meet the teachers and wine and cheese. And this one analyst came up to me and said, you know, Michael, nice to meet you. My name is so-and-so. I don't want to say his name. He said, I'd like to work with you in analysis. He said, I have a good feel about you. Now, for different reasons, I accepted the offer. It was a terrible mistake. And in New York, there's an expression. This is a little difficult stuff, okay? There's something called a chicken hawk. You have chicken, you know chicken hawk, Felipe?
Chicken hawk is the thing that you go with two cars and the first one to chicken out.
No. Quando un ragazzo si può arrivare a una stazione di pullman o treno e abbandono.
Abandonado.
E una persona matura si dice, ma tu sei magro, ma tu sei fame. You hungry? Are you cold? Vieni a casa mia, fai una doccia, ok? È grande seduzione. You understand? Okay.
Okay, not
So
really.
In English, when they say a chicken hawk, it's somebody that seduces people.
Okay.
Seduces young people.
Okay.
I didn't realize at the moment that it was a massive seduction, and I went along with it. Only for 1 year, though. And I'll tell you how I got out of it.
Bueno, él habla que en una como de esas reuniones de queso y vino, vino cierto personaje que le ofreció como una idea de iniciar análisis. Sin embargo, él, bueno, se dejó atrapar un poco por este personaje tan seductor, pero resulta que no fue la mejor de las decisiones.
I couldn't take hypocrisy. He was a theologian, a major priest, okay? Pretending and acting very sacred, very spiritual, very religious, and I knew what he was doing. All of the trainees knew what he was doing. He was having sex with some of the patients, and I said, what kind of lie is this? And I'm going to be, why am I in this field? Perché ho entrato a questo campo. Why? And then I'll tell you a dream that came, and I don't like to share too much, but I think it's kind of relevant here, that there was a dream that was so clear. I was living so far under my abilities. And I knew that was a statement about the analysis. And that was one of the first times, Eduardo, Felipe, I saw the dream as commenting objectively and accurately about the therapy. I was playing a game that, you know, the way adults play, but it was playing on like a kid's arena, like the way kids play it. And I said, what am I doing? He said, you know, you're trying too hard. You're striving for too much. I said, this is over, man. You are keeping me down and I'm getting the hell out of here tomorrow. And I said, it's over. But again, that was the first, I never thought about it this way, but that was the first time I really saw the dream as guiding the patient in the analytic process. And I stopped. I stopped immediately. And then I'll tell you the next part of the story. Thank you for asking, too. I haven't talked about this in a long time.
Ok, bueno, Michael te agradece por preguntar, por revivir esta anécdota. Bueno, acá pasa algo muy interesante y es que este personaje que era tan seductor tenía una fachada bastante pulcra, sacra, era un sacerdote que tenía como unos temas relacionados, bueno, era teólogo, estaba como muy involucrado con ese mundo. Y estaba como una pretensión, un enacting, una interpretación, se montó en un rol como tan sagrado, pero resulta que este personaje con el que estaba haciendo análisis estaba teniendo sexo con sus pacientes, bueno, incurriendo una falla ética importante. Entonces la pregunta de Michael es ¿por qué estoy acá, no? ¿Por qué he entrado a este campo arquetipal? ¿Qué me tiene vinculado acá? Y en ese momento apareció un sueño que de alguna manera le empezó a dar los primeros indicios como de cómo el sueño también guía el proceso terapéutico y cómo un sueño estaba dirigido al paciente. Él básicamente se soñó que estaba en una arenera, muy como en un juego de niños, siendo adulto en una arenera de un juego de niños, como advirtiendo un poco del encuadre, ¿no? El campo en el que estaba. Entonces, además, adicionalmente, su analista le interpretó el sueño como diciendo como, estás tratando mucho, estás tratando de hacer otra como una perversión del significado. Y ahí fue cuando Michael dijo, ya no puedo más, y suspendió el proceso de análisis.
Once I left that, the door opened in a good way, and grace entered my life in a profound way. And at one of the student meetings, one of the analysts came up to me and he said, I've heard about you and nice to meet you. Very formal. And it was Dr. Yoram Kaufman, who I never heard of. And he turned out to be, again, this is almost 50 years ago, Felipe, the most important person in my entire life. A man who cared about me, a man that I respect more than anybody I've ever met. And I learned more from than anyone in the world. And it happened that one night he came up and shook my hand. Nice to meet you. Very, very, not warm, not. And then I'll tell you this next part of the story.
Bueno, él habla que tras cerrar esa puerta, la otra puerta se abrió y que a partir de ese momento, un cierto día llegó casi que en unas condiciones muy particulares una persona en una inmensa formalidad, muy, no desde la grandiosidad ni la nada, sino como la simpleza de mucho gusto, ¿cómo estás? Este personaje era Kaufman, quien ha sido una de las personas que Michael ha respetado y ha aprendido más, una suerte de mentor que marcó profundamente su vida.
You know the expression enfant terrible?
Enfant terrible, yeah.
He was from Israel. He was an Israeli he was a physicist first, who later became a Jungian analyst, and he was a classic enfant terrible. Difficult, demanding, and passionate about what he did. And I had the good fortune, and I think it was my second year of training, to be in his case seminar with 5 other students. And then the whole thing really, your question really, Eduardo, then it really began, and I'll tell you about it.
Bueno, entonces este personaje encarnaba lo que era como un infant terrible, hace como referencia a estos niños complicadísimos, como que hace una referencia a lo demandante, a lo llevado, a lo movido que era, o sea, una persona que se notaba que abría camino.
There was no, you know the word pretense? There was no acting of being sacred, no grand show, look at me, how wonderful. Very, very rough, very difficult man, and absolutely brilliant. And in that supervision group, I saw that he had the ability to see an image, and from the image, he could tell you about the individual's life. And the way we did the group, and it's kind of interesting. And as trainees, he would say, I want you to present, each person will present for maybe 4 weeks. Okay, so Felipe, you and me, we're students, say, right? And we're to present a dream, the same patient, from the first dream to maybe the second dream of analysis, the second year, the third year, and fourth year of analysis. And we would say, don't you want the associations? He would say, no. I don't want to know anything about the patient. And I'll pause there. Extraño, dice extraño.
Bueno, este personaje tenía una capacidad extraordinaria en donde, bueno, primero él no se presentaba desde la sacralidad ni nada magnífico, sino que había una humildad ahí subyacente que lo acompañaba. Pero hay algo súper interesante y es que él con solo ver una imagen de un paciente ya podía revelar una cantidad de datos y conocer su vida. Y en el proceso de seminario y como de análisis de caso en el que estaba Michael con él, a él le decían, por ejemplo, bueno, traigo los sueños de un paciente, entonces traía 1, 2, 3, 4 sueños y luego el mismo estudiante le preguntaba a él, bueno, ¿y no quiere las asociaciones del sueño? Y decía, no, ya con el sueño es suficiente, ya tenía desde ahí muchísimos elementos para entender a las personas sin mayores amplificaciones individuales.
And his work was the greatest influence in my life. And really, he's the godfather to all of the CC work that we've been doing now for almost 40 years. And I'll explain why.
Bueno, y que básicamente por esta condición se volvió como el gran Godfather, el padrino, que realmente se convirtió como una inspiración para todo el grupo del desarrollo de análisis.
When all of us would present an image of a patient's dream, it was as though he would see in that image the story behind the image, the story contained in the image. And unlike all the other analysts I met, and even all the analysts I've come to meet over the past 40 years since him, maybe only 5% approaches imagery the way he did. For him, the image was not relative. Now remember, Felipe, he was a scientist. He was a quantum physicist. For him, he cared about objectivity, the objective world. And he saw that image as a profound communication from the self, informing somebody about something particular. In the same way, your words, when you say padrino, there's a certain connotation to that word. Mm-hmm. We can imagine all different things, but there's a certain connotation.
Oh, ok. Bueno, este personaje tenía una habilidad extraordinaria para poder entender las historias detrás de las imágenes. Michael dice que viendo a muchos analistas y todo, él asume que aproximadamente solo un 5% tiene esta capacidad como de hacer hablar a la imagen. Hay que recordar que el mentor de Michael era un físico cuántico, ¿no? Él era un científico y la idea de él no estaba tan basada en la subjetividad, sino que él traía antenada la pregunta del mundo objetivo. Entonces, bajo esta premisa, es como si que una palabra puede tener muchos significados, pero hay una connotación. Él se preguntaba por la connotación real de la palabra y no por los significados arbitrarios que podía traer cada persona de una palabra.
And while he cared about the physical world and the objective, I could say honestly, and I'm not trying to be nice, in the spirit of Pedraza, in the spirit of your friend here, Eduardo Cavallo, he had that deep regard for imagery. So while he seemed very scientific and a little distant, he was probably the most profound symbolist I've ever met in my life. He cared deep, and I only found out after he passed away that he was a Kabbalist for over 20, 30 years. He studied the Kabbalah, the Jewish mystical tradition. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. From the Talmud to the Kabbalah, he studied the symbols of that, and he never talked about it. Only his wife was the only one that knew this. And you see how powerful that is? Many of us want to say, well, look what I study, look what I do. I'm so spiritual, He didn't want anybody to know this. He didn't care. He was on this incredible journey, and the few of us that were able to tolerate the difficulties being with him, it was like, oh my God, who knew these kind of diamonds exist in this mind? You get filthy, your hands get all dug up trying to dig in the mind. But what we found, and I'll tell you one of the first stories and dream experiences that I said, oh my God, how did he ever know this from the dream image? And I'll tell you the story.
Ujú. Okay. Bueno, Michael comenta que de alguna manera él ha sido de los mejores simbolistas que ha conocido en su vida y que junto con López Pedraza y aquí el presente Eduardo Carballo, él dice que comparten esa misma resonancia de el gran aprecio por la imagen en el proceso analítico, en el proceso psíquico, en saberla recoger. Hay un dato interesante de él y es que él era cabalista y básicamente nadie sabía que él lo era, sino su esposa. La única que él sabía que había como una doctrina más profunda de lo humano acompañando su teoría. Entonces, Michael se impresionaba de cómo él podía coger un sueño y desde algunas cuantas apreciaciones y descripciones él podía generar unas simplificaciones que eran muy precisas.
I'm going to present a dream that came up in that class, okay?
Uh-huh.
One of the trainees. And Eduardo, one of the early classes in now some of the Latin American classes, I presented this dream a long time ago, but it's worth presenting again because it really shows what this work is about. Okay, now remember, he didn't want any associations about the case. He didn't want to know anything about the patient. And one of the trainees presented the following dream, a very simple dream, right? In the dream, the patient was having a gynecological exam, okay? And the female doctor had this giant light. If you can imagine, you know, like when they do highways, the big on the highways at night when they do the repair work, those kind of lights in the office, looking in into the privates of the woman.
Okay.
That's all there was to the dream. Now, what he did, I've never seen such brilliance in my life. And I don't just say nice things about people, and I don't idealize him. I like I said, growing up the way I did, you're pretty discerning. Okay, here's what he did. Mind you, he knew nothing at all about the patient. He knew nothing about the case. He said to the trainee, I said, number one, who are you supervising with? And he said, I don't even want you to answer me right now. He said, whoever you're supervising with, you have to stop that immediately. Your supervisor is brutalizing this patient who's pregnant, psychologically pregnant. She's carrying something. How dare anybody take this giant, I mean, like a highway light, or like in the stadiums, the soccer stadiums, the big lights in there, looking inside. How dare you expose somebody to that kind of violence and abuse? See, he said, get the hell out of that supervision immediately. She's destroying the analysis and she's hurting you. And I'll tell you what happened next. It's unbelievable what happened. And I'll tell you how he got there. I'll tell you what happened next and how we got there.
Okay. Bueno, hay una hazaña bien importante y es en uno de los sueños en la clase de supervisión se reúnen varios analistas para la gente que de pronto no conoce. La clase de supervisión consta de un supervisor revisando cómo están llevando cada uno de los estudiantes los casos. Entonces una persona trajo un sueño de una paciente en donde esta paciente estaba en un examen ginecológico y alrededor de ella había como una parafernalia casi como de construcción, había como unas luces, como cuerdas, como andamios, como todo apuntándole como a su zona reproductiva. Y lo impresionante es que él solo tuvo esta imagen, pero inmediatamente se le acerca a la persona y le dice, bueno, ¿quién es su supervisor? ¿Quién es el supervisor de este caso? ¿No? Y le dijo, yo no sé quién sea, pero la persona que sea el supervisor de este caso, suspenda el proceso con él. Esto es el colmo que de alguna manera esta mujer esté siendo tan invadida, esta hay una parte, hay un abuso, alguien que se está poniendo esto tan impropio, esta construcción está invadiendo sexualmente y le está haciendo daño a la paciente y a usted como la persona. Entonces suspenda el caso con el supervisor, pero lo extraordinario es el nivel de intuición para poder con solo una imagen llegar a dicha conjetura.
Okay. Oh, he said that, right? And the supervisor was, the student was a woman. She just started crying. And we looked, I mean, I don't mean just tears. She was just bawling, wailing, crying. And we looked at her like, what happened? And Yoram said, you want to tell the story? And she cried for about 15 minutes. And she said, I've been in supervision. What do you say? A bruja? A bruja, no, a witch.
A witch. Sí, sí, sí.
He said, this supervisor, the woman, this young and analyst woman supervisor, is telling me what to do with the case. I disagree with everything she's saying. I think everything she's saying has been wrong. And she said to me, that the trainee goes on to say, that if I don't follow her recommendations, she's going to make sure I never graduate from the institute. And she said, I didn't know how to get out of it. And then she explained a little, she had her own terrible, terrible negative mother complex as well. But it was objectively destructive, what was going on.
Wow.
And then I'll explain how you understood the dream, how he got there, which is just astounding.
This is impressive. Definitely. Bueno, resulta que una vez se menciona en el caso esto de que abandonara. Bueno, la estudiante arranca a llorar. Está desconsolada y le dicen, bueno, quiere contarnos qué es lo que está pasando. Entonces ella advierte que la supervisora del caso, la que la está ayudando a llevar en particular esta situación, es una bruja, es una mujer muy complicada que todo el tiempo le dice qué es lo que tiene que hacer en relación al caso paso por paso, que ella se está dando cuenta que ella está haciendo todo mal, que no funciona, pero que básicamente ella está bajo la amenaza de que si no cumple las orientaciones literalmente, ella se va a asegurar de que ella no se pueda graduar y que no sabía para nada cómo salir de ahí. Entonces, de alguna manera, sí se estaba augurando una situación destructiva.
Two things I heard later explained all this, and then I'll give you the details of what he did. The Christian theologian, Teilhard Chardin, he said at one point, matter is spirit moving slowly enough to be seen.
Again, Michael, again, sorry.
In materia, è spirito in movimento lentamente si può visibile. Okay? Matter is spirit. Il movimento lentamente come si può vedere. Matter is spirit moving slowly enough to be seen. Oh my God. The second one is that another way to understand is the presence of the unexpressed. The presence of the unexpressed. Which means even when something's not spoken of, it's present, it's manifested, it's constellated. What he did, and I'll give the mechanism in a minute, he was able to, from that image, he was able to see that that image contained a very, very a disturbing, a deeply disturbing story, but there was a particular story contained in that. So when Chardin says matter is spirit moving slowly enough to be seen, I understand now the image is spirit moving slowly enough to be seen. If we can then translate, not interpret, to translate it. And the method he developed over the years is really, it's exactly what Jung did. It's classical Jung. And I'll tell you how he got there now. But those two pieces, Chardin and the presence of the unseen, captures all this work we've been doing for 45 years or whatever.
Bueno, Teilhard de Chardin tiene una frase muy valiosa que es la materia es el espíritu moviéndose lo suficientemente lento para ser visto. Se habla de este concepto de la presencia de lo no expresado, ¿no? Todas las imágenes contienen una historia y hay gente que, y aquí hay una distinción que es muy valiosa, que más que interpretar, lo que hace es traducir, es entender los efectos de la imagen no desde las interpretaciones subjetivas, sino de lo que está hablando un estado simbólico casi que más elevado.
Okay, now how he did this work, okay? And we said, what happened? What just happened in his class that somehow she didn't tell you anything, but you knew the story? And the way my psyche always worked is, it still works like that. If you figured it out, if you can cook that way, I want to learn how to cook. If you get those flavors, I want to learn how to do it. Okay. And we all said, what did you do? And how did you do it? And he began to explain it. He didn't use the language of el campo, but he always spoke about the dynamics of an archetype. They maintain coherent features. That language okay, Felipe?
Can you repeat after the dynamics of the field?
That every archetype has certain dynamical features to it that are coherent. Okay. When you play your music, or I see you have a lot with horses, right? In the pictures, I'm sure you know a lot about certain horse behavior is going to indicate certain things. Mm-hmm. That horse is pregnant, or that horse is having trouble with the feet, or horse is whatever. You begin to read the story, okay? Because behavior often expresses the field. Images indicate the field. So without giving that language, he said, look, there's an archetype of a gynecological exam. It's all about pregnancy. I mean, in this case, it's about the woman who's pregnant. There are certain things you do. I'm sure with the pregnant horse, there are certain things you do, certain things you don't do. And there's a physician, as analyst, there are certain things you do with certain cases, certain things we don't do. Okay. That's part of it. Certain ways we work with our children, and our kids are older now, but when they're young kids, 5 years old, 8 years old, certain things I'm not going to do, and certain things, yes, it's appropriate. And he said, and here's a key that has influenced my work profoundly. He said, everything in the dream was dissonant. You don't do this kind of thing. You don't expose somebody to this. You don't put this giant illumination on the private parts here. That's no way to approach a beautiful birth process. And if you're going to do that, it means you have absolutely no concern for the birth. You use the word parto for birth.
Yes.
Un parto cativo. Un parto cativo. And he got it from the image, you see. And that's where I began developing even more from my own culture, my upbringing, but clinically. I said, oh my God, he's saying that there are these coherent images, coherent, we say now, fields. Certain things fit that field, certain things don't fit that field. The degree of dissonance in that story let him know that, oh my God, if this birth process is being treated in a way that's so violent and abusive and destructive, the psychological birth process in the treatment, there's something violent going on. And the way he got to the supervisor, which is still profound and interesting, it was another party looking in. And he knew it wasn't the analyst. The analyst would never use the giant light. So somebody else was getting this giant illumination. Now, while we could say, isn't it wonderful to be illuminated? You want your wife to be treated like that. You want your daughter to be treated like that. And he understood the images are not random. It was a precision and deep respect and awe for the image. He said, the image is conveying a particular story. We don't need to associate to the image. Of course, we want to know what you think and feel about it, but you don't put that kind of highway light or stadium light to look at the pregnant woman. It was so dissonant. It was an indication that something was dramatically wrong in the whole treatment, in the whole process.
Mm-hmm.
I never thought about that before. I never thought that way.
Okay. Bueno, amplificando este caso, este episodio, en donde básicamente todo el mundo estaba, todos los estudiantes absolutamente como en asombro, como esto es magia, parece magia, porque ella no había dicho nada y él conocía la historia. Entonces, acá es bien importante el preguntarnos, bueno, esto no es necesariamente magia, esto tuvo que haber unas mecánicas, algo detrás que pudo dar estos indicios de que algo no estaba en lo correcto. Entonces, hay algo muy interesante y es que el campo arquetipal, el campo tiene una coherencia y tiene como unas dinámicas que se respetan, ¿no? Y el comportamiento suele expresar un campo. Entonces aquí el campo era el del embarazo. Y hay cosas que uno dice, bueno, hay cosas que son coherentes con el embarazo y hay cosas que no. Hay maneras coherentes de portarse con los niños, con los abuelos, en el trabajo. El campo encierra una coherencia que es muy importante. Entonces lo que advirtió que este proceso estaba teniendo un peligro subyacente es la disonancia de los elementos en el sueño, la disonancia de los elementos del campo. ¿Cómo es que en un embarazo, en un proceso de evaluar, de mirar y de analizar este momento de la vida, hay elementos tan disonantes como una construcción, como unas luces de estadio, como unas herramientas tan impropias? Y fue desde evaluar esa incoherencia del relacionamiento y la transgresión de las mecánicas del campo del embarazo que se pudo inferir ese peligro que estaba ahí.
And thus began 30 years of being a student of his. He was my mentor the way Padrazo is for you, Eduardo. He was my mentor for 25, 30 years until he died about 10 years ago. And it remains the greatest loss of my life.
Y bueno, este personaje ha sido quien acompañó a Michael durante los 45 años de proceso de desarrollo y que ha caminado paralelamente su vida.
And the very last part of my story that I promise I'll shut up. I began, because of that work, I began asking a question. I said, what is it that has a capacity to structure matter? Okay. Whether structure the behavior of your horses that do certain things, or our patients that do certain things, that structure magnetic things that occur in fields, like a magnetic magnet on iron filing. I said, what does it? And what it was for me was the issue of, I didn't know the word that it was replication. I mean, how is it that so much of our lives, like this woman, she had a terrible negative mother complex. It got repeated somehow. It was objectively repeated. It wasn't transference. It wasn't fantasy. She was a bruja, the supervisor. She was a terrible person. She did it. Anyway, when I asked the question, what has the capacity to structure matter and literally structure matter, I came up with one answer after about 5 years of study. Il campo. From gravitational fields to magnetic fields. The field structures. We have so many examples. Mm-hmm. And that's what has been influencing my life for the past, for all these years. And I'm actually happy and proud to see the influence that it's taking in so many places. Not that I care. I never cared. I'm being honest with you, I never cared whether it would develop and people would follow. I didn't care. I was interested. And I just followed what I loved. And it seemed like other people liked the meal. But that's not the important thing for me. The important thing is I felt with Kaufman, and I discovered something profound, discovered that, we're living in a world where it's like the veil is always kind of down, separating us from those things that structure and influence life. And sometimes, we get a chance to kind of do this for effect, kind of lift the veil and see what's behind it. Mm-hmm. And when you begin to understand these fields, and one of the things about when I mentioned Goethe in the beginning, he was interested in what was destined to become manifest. The author of the book said, but he didn't care about what was there before it was manifested. That's what we're doing. The archetype is there, the constellation is there, even before it's manifested. That's an incredible inquiry and study. And you realize that we could do something with, say, violence, like what's going on in different parts of the world today, it's gone on at the beginning of time. If you can begin to kind of sense what's happening before it's even manifest, oh my God. In families where there's violence, in countries. So this is what's inspired me, and this is part of it. Thank you for the question and the opportunity today, Philippe. But this is what's moved my life all these years. And it's, it's not an easy ride, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a story.
Thank you, Michael. Very wonderful story.
Wow. I've been taking classes with you for so many long, and I hope I keep taking classes with you and keep learning from you. I didn't know this story. Well, I'm gonna translate it now, but I'm touched. I'm inspired,
And so I still feel that way.
Well,
either of you have any questions? I mean, again, you said just go.
No.
I've never.
Felipe has to translate the last part.
I have to translate, and then afterwards we'll take the questions. Okay. Bueno, después de estos 45 años de monitoría con Kaufman, hubo una pregunta muy importante, y es la de ¿qué puede estructurar la materia? ¿Qué en la naturaleza, qué en el cosmos, qué en la vida tiene la capacidad de estructurar la materia? Y esto es bien interesante porque la respuesta a esta pregunta es el campo. Así como en la naturaleza uno ve campos gravitacionales, campos magnéticos, hay un campo psíquico, hay un campo arquetipal que de alguna manera va prefigurando y armando, bueno, ciertas manifestaciones. Y esto es bien interesante porque a medida que uno empieza a conceptualizar y entender la vida desde ese lugar, Michael habla de la gran inspiración que le generó su mentor, porque él ahora ve todo como que hay un gran velo que de alguna manera podemos levantar, que aprendemos a ver unas estructuras preformadas, el campo detrás de la manifestación. Entonces esto es lo que tiene que ver con cuando Gorkin hablaba de lo destinado a manifestarse, hay unas preformaciones que trae la manifestación y que a uno le van agudizando este olfato. Michael habla de cómo él se le fue afinando el olfato, por ejemplo, para entender procesos de violencia. Pero yo lo he visto y tiene olfato para todo. Tiene una capacidad para leer y anticipar unos procesos que por saber ya leer y nutrirse en la coherencia de estos campos. Entonces vamos a pasar a atender algunas de sus preguntas.
Yo quería comentar algo que creo que es importante como precisar, ¿no? Que es la relación que Michael hizo entre este concepto de arquetipos que nos traía Jung en temas de coherencia y esta visión acerca de cómo el campo estructura. Y yo creo que lo potente de poder ver el campo arquetipal tiene que ver con eso, ¿no? Ya no es solamente el arquetipo como concepto o como posibilidad, sino el campo que le da la posibilidad de ver cómo se transforma en estructura. Y desde allí, y desde la coherencia del campo, es que se puede hacer una lectura de lo que tenemos enfrente.
Okay, Eduardo is saying that one of your biggest, how do you translate aportes?
Yes,
like
well,
that
what
you
I'm
have
trying to say,
one of the most powerful things that you have taught us is that basically the archetype is more powerful than just the basic Jungian acception that is a possibility of a complex or a concept, sorry. Instead, you portray it as some kind of energy, like I feel like something greater that encompasses way more. And that ability to read just not the archetype as a concept, but the mechanics that surround it, the coherence is what enriches our visions as analysts and people interested in psychology.
I mean, you find it's, from the animal world, it structures behavior, it structures our life, whether the instinctive behavior, which is a whole field of ethology in animals, native patterns. We have native patterns, and you realize it's something else organizing it. The profound experience of a parent seeing their child for the first time, or grandchild for the first time, or being inspired with the work of art, music, or love. Grande enamorado. I mean, there's something taking over your life, and yeah, Jung and von Franz knew this. They got it. That's why this is not different. It's an old song that it's
playing.
It's playing again. Thank God. Thank you for the comment. And it is ultimately working with archetypes is working with energy. You're 100% accurate. It's all energy. And that understanding that shows the profound role that we have in this work to either help to change when we can change the destructive alignment or reinforce a generative alignment. Oh my God. You could put poison on your plants. You can put something wonderful on your plants. You need to know what we're dealing with. And it's not arrogance, it's a learning process. It's learning, like you with the horses, Felipe. I'm sure you've spent many years learning what that horse with that condition needs and what this horse needs. It's art, it's lyrical, it's objective, it's study, it's respect and awe, ultimately.
That's beautiful. Bueno, Michael habla de cómo, por ejemplo, en la teología hay una experiencia repetitiva, un patrón que de alguna manera ya nos empieza a dar una coherencia. La repetición como un modelo importante de la vida en donde él trae la metáfora que, por ejemplo, cuestiones como el amor, la música, el arte es una vieja canción que sigue sonando, que tenemos que aprender a escuchar. Cómo se comporta, cómo se repite, cómo sigue. Y bueno, él habla como de una ética derivada de esto que es muy bonita, que es el poder entender estas cosas, ¿no? Nuestra misión es empezar a leer estos patrones porque de alguna manera esto no es mecánico. Uno para aprender a leer un caballo tiene que pasar tiempo ahí, tiene que ver sus reacciones, tener ojos atentos para poder, bueno, seguir entendiendo mecánicas del mundo tanto científico como psíquico. Usa dos palabras muy bonitas como un arte objetivo, arte y objetivo que yo sintetizo acá en esta interpretación mía de aprender a recoger esa objetividad que se repite en los campos. Okay. I just wanted to say, Michael, that I believe you are a true alchemist.
What?
I just wanted to tell you that I believe that you are a true alchemist, because the alchemists in the past extrapolated the principles of chemistry to the psyche. And now you're extrapolating the principles of the physics and electromagnetism to a broader aspect of the psychic dimension. So I believe you deserve that title.
Had some great teachers, though, really great teachers. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Eduardo, do you have any other questions?
Yes, thank you very much. It has been a wonderful conversation, a wonderful approach. We have here one question. Is from Susana Guanich. Susana Guanich pregunta, ¿este campo está en la conciencia o al ser arquetipal está en el inconsciente? I think it's a beautiful question because she's talking about, again, the meaning about the field and the archetype. No? She's asking, is this field in the conscious or in the way that it's archetypal is in the unconscious? I want to introduce you some before because this is, for me, the most important part of your work, ¿no? Le digo a Michael que yo quería introducir un poco la primera parte de la respuesta porque para mí es exactamente lo importante del trabajo de Michael, ¿no? Cuando uno percibe el campo, uno toma conciencia o puede tomar conciencia del campo. Y cuando uno toma conciencia del campo, emerge toda la otra parte que está en el inconsciente que tiene que ver con el patrón arquetipal que de alguna manera brotó desde allí. Entonces, a partir de esta pequeña introducción, entonces, bueno, esperamos la respuesta o la amplificación de Michael.
You know, from what I tell at this point, what I could think at this point is the field is a part of nature. I mean, like the gravity, electromagnetic, like when the animals do their migration, we may not understand it, but nature does. So is it inconsciente or consciente? I think it's a phenomenon. I think we're unconscious of it. It's a part of life that's expressed all the time. I think we are unconscious of it. And an analogy, I think of many analogies. You may not know your wife or your daughter-in-law is pregnant. And then we find out, oh my God, yes. I mean, you say, oh my God, you look so great. Maybe that's why you're tired. And then we understand it, but it's already telling its story. And I think what's unconscious or what we're unconscious of is, as you said before, it's the incredibly the structural dynamics of the field, to structure, to make that pregnancy happen, to have that patient so taken over by the destructive mother or by the loving mother. That's a part of nature and psyche. And I think it's our, if you wanted to use a little different question, what's our task? Our task is to become conscious of these dynamics. Mm-hmm. I mean, how many physical things do we have? We don't even realize what the issue is until years later. Oh my God, I never realized I have gout or whatever. That's why I can't move my feet sometimes. Well, who knew? But it's a part. And I think that's what Jung said. He said, look, if you want to understand psyche, look at nature. And I think these are part of nature's, as Van Franz said, I'm saying too much, nature's constants. The nature's constants are not trying to hide. And it was Jung that said, nature and psyche reveals, they don't conceal. For Freud, they conceal. You're hiding it, nature's hiding. Not hiding nothing. I don't speak Spanish. You may not speak Italian. We don't speak Russian. They're not concealing. We don't know the language. And what this work is about is, I mean, look at all the books you have and all the studies you do, your collection of figurines, Eduardo. It's learning the language. So I say in that sense, I don't think it's about unconscious dynamics. I think we're not familiar. You and I have been to Russia together, right? We didn't know their language, but they were communicating. We learned how to ask for vodka.
A lot of it.
We learned those words.
Ok. Bueno, la respuesta a esta pregunta es... Michael no está tan preocupado por la categorización de consciente o inconsciente, sino más bien por categorizar esto como un fenómeno natural, ¿no? Como una parte de la vida que de alguna manera cuenta la historia en sí misma, como un embarazo. Entonces, él cita a Jung en una frase muy bonita que es: si quieres entender la psique, mira la naturaleza. Entonces esto es como que la misma naturaleza se nos está expresando, está manifiesta y realmente no, la naturaleza revela, no esconde. Básicamente que nosotros todavía no tengamos el saber o algo, la naturaleza no nos lo está tratando de hacer inconsciente ni esconderlo, está ahí, y precisamente nuestra labor es cada vez acercarnos a las lecturas y entender más esos campos, esos movimientos, esas dinámicas del campo, pero no hay una pretensión de ocultar que, por ejemplo, sí existía en el paradigma freudiano en donde el inconsciente sí ocultaba. No, acá la misma naturaleza expresa y bueno, nosotros tenemos la tarea de volvernos conscientes de estas mecánicas del campo.
Bueno, quiero agradecer a Michael muchísimo por haber aceptado esta invitación e invitarlos para seguir profundizando con el trabajo que Michael ha tenido por más de 35 años. Pueden visitar la página de la Psique Institute, el que aparte, a partir de un viaje precisamente que Michael hizo a Colombia, se transformó en el Centro Internacional para Estudio de los Patrones Arquetipales. Entonces, en la página de la Psique Institute pueden chequear la cantidad de actividades y eventos que Michael plantea en esta búsqueda espectacular acerca de la relación entre psique y materia, ¿no? Entonces, Michael, I was saying that thank you very much for accepting this invitation and inviting to the audience to look into your page, the page of Assisi Institute, as the center of the International Center for the Studies of Archetypal Patterns, to see all the activities that you always have over there and your work for more than 35 years. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you both. I mean, I'm sure it's more difficult having to do this translation, and I apologize, I'm not speaking Spanish.
Oh,
so
no, not at all.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for my sloppy translation. If it comes to that.
No. Y que Michael y yo también, en nombre de todo el equipo, quiero agradecer a Felipe por haber estado en este esfuerzo, que realmente hasta que uno no está en esa posición no se da cuenta del enorme esfuerzo que representa llevar servir de traductor y poder transmitir de la manera que Felipe lo hizo, el contenido e ideas complejas y profundas. Entonces, muchas gracias, Felipe. Me uno al agradecimiento de Michael por este enorme esfuerzo. Y a ustedes, audiencia, le queremos comentar, bueno, que seguimos con esta serie de conversatorios. El próximo miércoles vamos a tener a Karen Fleischer en un conversatorio que llamamos El cuerpo como vía de conexión al self. Karen, muchos de ustedes ya la conocen, forma parte bueno, prácticamente forma parte de nuestra familia. Es una de las pioneras en el movimiento auténtico en Latinoamérica, específicamente en el sur de Latinoamérica. Y bueno, es una persona espectacular que sé que vamos a disfrutar muchísimo. Entonces, bueno, muchísimas gracias a ustedes por estar acá, por sus preguntas, por sus comentarios y bueno, porque como siempre decimos, son la razón de este espacio y de seguir haciendo este esfuerzo. Well, Michael, again, thank you very much. Have a very, very good night, and we will see very, very soon. Okay.
Wait. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you, Felipe. Thank you.
No, thanks to you. We'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.